Well, this is the most stressful book report ever. A few weeks ago, the U.S. Supreme Court heard the case of Mahmoud versus Taylor, and in a little while, the ruling will come in. This is an unusual case in that it's about picture books written for children. You might be asking, why on earth would the Supreme Court need to get involved with children's picture books? Oh, and even getting into a topic this explosive is pretty stressful for me, so I'm going to use a lot of memes to keep things from getting too heavy.
Nice.
I'm also going to need some industrial strength herbal tea. In Montgomery County, Maryland, the government-run school district started including books with LGBTQ+ themes in its curriculum for students who were 4 to 11 years old. At first, it was part of what Americans call health class, which is an optional part of the curriculum that covers stuff like the birds and the bees, the dangers of drugs, and other life skills. Generally, American parents are able to review this kind of curriculum and decide if they want to opt their children out. A kid's personal needs or culture or religion might mean that it's better to learn about this stuff at home rather than getting the one-size-fits-all lessons at school. This used to be the case in Montgomery County. Parents had the right to be notified before LGBTQ+ books were used in class, and they could have a look at them, decide how they felt about them, and if they wanted, they could have their kid taken out of class during that lesson and given an alternate activity. Now, if you're not American and you're wondering if this is reasonable, it totally is. American kids come out of class for all kinds of reasons, like a kid with dyslexia might need some reading therapy or something like that, or sometimes kids have a musical class or a medical need. Schools do this all the time, and they're completely set up to do it. But then the Montgomery County schools decided they wanted to move the LGBTQ+ themed books from the health curriculum, which is optional, to the English curriculum, which is not. The school district announced that they would no longer notify parents when these books were taught and that parents would not be able to opt their children out of reading them. There were some noisy school board meetings. Then a group of parents got together and decided to sue the school district. Court case, and now this is being decided by the United States Supreme Court.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
The parents are not asking the Supreme Court to ban any books, and they're not asking the school to change its curriculum. What they are asking for in this particular case, at least the way I understand it, is they want their opt-out rights to be restored. I'm not going to be getting into any of the social or political issues, though, and I'm certainly not going to be giving a legal opinion because A, that sounds miserable, B, this is a show about books, and C, I am utterly unqualified to cover those subjects. Plenty of people are already talking about the fight around these books, but there isn't a lot of discussion of the books themselves and why they're on the English curriculum at all. So since nobody else is talking about it, I guess I will.
I volunteer as tribute!
I read all the books that are part of the case of Mahmoud versus Taylor. I'll tell you about them, and I'll try to do this as neutrally as possible. My opinions, or anyone else's when it comes to LGBTQ+ issues, aren't what this case is about. I asked myself the following questions when analyzing these books. 1. What's in the stories? 2. Are the stories and pictures of high or low literary and artistic quality? 3. Do these books meet the high standards for use in an English curriculum? All kinds of books can be used in school, and not everything needs to be at the level of To Kill a Mockingbird or The Diary of Anne Frank. I like the Captain Underpants series, for example. You could probably teach it in art class or use it as a personal reading selection, but something like that doesn't really make the cut for use in the English curriculum. You have to apply a much higher standard for anything that you teach in English class. Books should have complex plots and characters so that children can analyze them. These texts should teach children new vocabulary and give them the chance to examine the structure of language, including rhyme, symbolism, subtext, metaphor, allegory, and all that good literary analysis stuff. Books that are in the English curriculum should deepen students' cultural and artistic understanding. So if you feel that I'm too hard on any of these books, just remember that I'm holding them to the absolute highest standard. I evaluate books, movies, and works of art based on how well they accomplish their goal. I can absolutely love a dumb action flick as well as really, really highbrow art because they're both trying to achieve different things. And if you're trying to be an English class, you've got to be high-grade literature. This is an incredibly explosive topic, so I just want to remind everyone that I'm making no comments about any individual people, their beliefs, or the way they live. Classroom rules apply in the comments section. No potty mouth, no personal attacks, or I will write you a referral and send you to the principal's office.
You've got a real attitude problem, McFly. You're a slacker.
If you're naughty, you'll have to write 100 lines. My first group of books are the ones that I don't think can be justified at all as part of an English curriculum. These stories don't have real plots or characters. They're meant to instruct children in the same way as an illustrated Bible reader. There are pre-approved opinions, definitions, and actions, and the kids are meant to absorb them without question. You may agree or disagree with what's in the books, but that's not the issue. Public schools in America are not allowed to tell children what to believe or what political and social actions they must take. The old saying is, teach children how to think, not what to think, and these books really don't follow that. I have a tiny bit of sympathy for these books because their task was impossible. Picture books do best with pure, simple stories and characters. There's not a lot of text in a picture book, so if you try to get into a complicated topic that needs detail and nuance to discuss properly, you're gonna have a big problem. All of these books oversimplify big, complex issues to the point that I think they probably harm their own cause. Intersection Allies was written by a committee of academics. That's not a joke, and it shows. There's a lengthy foreword that asks, what might the future look like if all children were taught about justice, equity, and solidarity alongside the alphabet and arithmetic? Then there's a letter to grown-ups. This is a picture book. When is the story gonna start? When it finally gets going, a bad imitation of the poetic style of Dr. Seuss combines with flat and kind of lifeless pictures to teach kids about how to make room for all. Intersection Allies speed runs through a bunch of shallow stereotypes, not giving us enough time to get to know any of the girls in the book. Yeah, there's no boys in a book about making room for all. The authors seem to expect that young readers will just accept the social and political beliefs that are being transmitted in this book. Some of the stuff they talk about seems patronizingly obvious, like when a girl in a wheelchair wants to join some girls playing basketball, so they step back and let her. The book also explains what babysitting is. Intersection Allies just makes a lot of statements and then moves on without taking the time to explain anything properly. Intersection Allies promotes gender-neutral bathrooms in schools, explains that one girl is gender fluid because she likes to wear a cape.
What?
It shows a young girl confronting a group of hostile-looking police. That image bothered me because protesting is not an activity for very young children. They won't understand any of the issues that all the adults are protesting over, and they certainly won't understand how to stay safe in an environment where there's a lot of adults with very intense feelings, and some of them are armed. Intersection Allies switches away from English without providing a translation for young readers who then just won't get to know what the page says. It tells readers that every girl who wears a hijab is making an informed, empowering choice, and it features a Native American girl named Dakota who has a mystical connection with the earth. There's really nothing for students to interpret or analyze here. I hope you enjoyed receiving your new opinions, class. Now write 30 identical book reports. Out of the 9 books involved in Mahmoud versus Taylor, this is the one that I think someone could justifiably call propaganda. It's not fun to read, and it is here to tell you what to think. Next up is What Are Your Words? A book about pronouns. Wow, what an exciting title. The illustrations are pretty dull, executed in that generic, overused minimalist folk art style. In this book, a kid tells us all about Uncle Leor. The kid isn't important enough to get a name until a few pages in, and we never get to learn anything about this kid's personality, interests, or problems because this isn't a story. It's more like a sock puppet telling kids how to think and act. Be a nonconformist, just like me. Uncle Leor uses they-them pronouns. Uncle Leor is a biologist. This random fact has nothing to do with the plot, so it's kind of hard not to interpret it as a passive-aggressive jab at people who say pronouns should be linked to biology. When Uncle Leor comes to visit, a sort of catechism takes place. Uncle Leor asks this poor kid, whose name is finally given as Ari, "What are your words?" Meaning that Uncle Leor wants to know what pronouns the kid is using for the day. The uncle encourages the kid to switch pronouns frequently, and Ari does so to the point that he, she, a, or they doesn't know who Z is anymore. The kid becomes so distressed that it's impossible to enjoy a fireworks show with the rest of the family. But then Ari settles on they-them pronouns, just like Uncle Leor. This is supposed to be a book that promotes LGBTQ plus acceptance.
Right.
What Are Your Words shows an adult indoctrinating a child in a certain way of thinking, and then taking no responsibility when those teachings are so destabilizing and upsetting that the child has a full-blown identity crisis. I can see this aspect of What Are Your Words being even more upsetting to parents than the fact that the book promotes the idea that kids should switch pronouns whenever they want and expect the rest of the world to remember the pronoun of the moment. Statistically speaking, use of neopronouns and frequent pronoun switching have very little social or political support. And I think this book isn't going to help anybody who wants to change that. What Are Your Words doesn't teach kids about how to use pronouns as a part of the structure of language. It has no real plot, no character development, no literary value, unimpressive artwork, and seems likely to do more harm than good for the cause of adopting pronouns as an expression of identity. Uncle Leor comes across as entitled, demanding, and indifferent to the kids' needs. Leor reminds me of a couple of adults I remember from childhood. I had a friend who had an auntie who would come around, and before she'd even put her purse down, she would walk up to my friend and be like, "Recite your seven times tables." I knew another kid whose dad would do the same thing with Bible verses, and all this really did was stress the kids out and make them feel like love and acceptance was conditional on being able to perform a certain way.
Under pressure.
From my point of view, as someone who wants high-quality books in the English curriculum, I don't think What Are Your Words is a great choice at all because it's just a badly written book about a horrible grown-up who likes to boss a kid around. Jacob's Room to Choose has illustrations that are fine, but it's not really a story. It's more like one of those workplace behavior videos that you have to watch when you start a new job.
Take a look at the following situations. See if you can tell what behavior is considered inappropriate.
Jacob is a little boy, he looks like a kindergartner, who goes to use the boys' bathroom in the school library, but he gets chased out because he's wearing a dress. Even though he was just in class with the same kids and everything was fine. At the same moment, a girl gets chased out of the girls' bathroom because she's wearing trousers and a plaid shirt. I've seen boys get bullied for appearing effeminate, but this really doesn't happen with girls. I spent most of the 90s wearing plaid flannel, and it was fine. Anyway, this contrived scenario means that now the teacher can tell all the children what to think. She tells them since people don't always look exactly like the icons on bathroom doors, there's no way to know which bathroom anyone should use, so everyone should just use whatever bathroom they want, and nobody should complain about that.
Are you sure?
She tells the kids to make posters and slogans in support of self-identification into bathrooms. At no point are any parents consulted. The teacher doesn't appear to consider that there are a wide variety of legally protected opinions on this issue, and she never wonders if she's crossed a line as a teacher by telling the children what to think and directing them to engage in social activism. Gosh, I wonder why some parents objected to this book. The teacher in this book behaves unprofessionally and unethically, and depending on where you live, perhaps illegally. In Maryland, where Mahmoud versus Taylor originates, schools do allow people to use whatever bathroom they want, but in many other places there are laws that restrict bathroom use to biological sex. This issue is too legally, socially, and professionally complicated to deal with in a picture book. It also validates concerns that teachers are telling children what to do and think and cutting parents out of the conversation. Jacob's Room to Choose doesn't belong in the English curriculum because it isn't actually a story with characters and a plot. There's nothing to interpret, and it's just meant to be absorbed unquestioningly. Born Ready also made the mistake of taking on a topic too complicated for picture books. It was professionally published, but I have to say it looks like a first draft that was self-published. The illustrations have awkward and inconsistent proportions, and the pictures are flat and oddly composed. The text is tacked onto pictures rather than being well integrated, and the font size is too small, making the images look unbalanced. I've seen Christians support a book or a movie because it happens to have Christian themes or was made by Christian artists, even if it stinks. I kind of wonder if that's what happened with Born Ready. A flawed argument can do harm to a cause, and uncritically promoting a flawed argument definitely does harm to a cause. Born Ready takes a big, complicated, sensitive subject and oversimplifies it to the point of making the case for people who don't think children should be allowed to transition. Penelope is a kid who likes skateboards, high tops, baggy blue jeans, button front shirts, math, science, getting straight A's, and mohawk haircuts. So that means Penelope can't possibly be a girl.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Penelope goes to Mom and says, I'm a boy. And Mom says, of course you are. Penelope puts on boy clothes, and the family tells everyone that Penelope is a boy. Now Penelope is happy. The end.
You sure about that?
The mom in this story is the author, and Penelope is a real kid. There has got to be more to the real-life story than what's in this picture book, but I can only go off what's in the book because that's all the kids in the classroom get. Critics of the idea of child transition often argue that gender identity relies on superficial stereotypes. The text of the book, Born Ready, explains Penelope's identity as a boy using really superficial stereotypes, and its entire argument can be demolished with the question, why can't a girl like any of those things? There are complex, nuanced ways to discuss someone's sense of self and their life choices. But even the most skilled author and illustrator couldn't do that with a great picture book, and this isn't even a good picture book. The character of Penelope, not the real kid, leave the real kid alone, is poorly developed. This is meant to be a story about embracing one's true identity, but it's botched. It would be very easy for children to read this book and think that a makeover won't fix Penelope's self-loathing, or that girls aren't allowed to have a funky haircut or be into martial arts. When the meaning of a story is unclear, this should be an intentional choice by the author, not an accident caused by bad writing. So that's 4 out of 9 books that don't make the grade. But wait, there's more. The Montgomery County School District has spent at least $2 million on this case, which shows that they strongly feel that these picture books belong in the curriculum. However, they gave up on justifying the use of 2 books on this list. Since this legal odyssey began, both My Rainbow and Pride Puppy were voluntarily removed from the curriculum by Montgomery County after objections by parents, and according to some of the reporting I've read, teachers and principals at the individual schools. My Rainbow is an autobiographical picture book written by a political activist and her transgender child. This is another one that looks like a first draft. The illustrations are slightly better than the ones in Born Ready, but the prose is a lot more clunky. A family is relaxing at home. One of the kids, Trinity, is playing with a doll and then sadly says, I can't be a girl. The mom asks why, and Trinity says, I need long hair. The mom points out, I have short hair, and Trinity says, but I'm a transgender girl. Trinity then explains that society will accept her mother having short hair, but transgender girls are expected to have long hair.
Ooh, yeah.
They go to the wig shop, but none of the wigs are right for Trinity. So the mom learns to make a custom rainbow wig for her child, who is then very happy. This book is kind of a mess. It was taught to second graders, and I think the only part of the story that children can relate to is where the mom learns how to make the wig so that she can make her kid happy. But this book was so poorly planned and executed that it falls apart with even gentle examination. The author fails to show, don't tell, by informing the reader that Trinity has autism, rather than incorporating this into the character's personality and actions. Also, because this is just a short picture book, it oversimplifies things to the point of saying stuff like, I need to have long hair to be a girl because that's what society expects. My Rainbow is supposed to be a joyful story about self-expression, but it teaches young readers that they should change their appearance so that others will approve of them. It's perfectly natural for kids to express themselves through the way they dress, but the kid in this book does not understand that true self-worth has to come from within, not from something you wear. Even worse, the mom affirms Trinity's incorrect understanding of self-esteem. The intentions were good here, and I'm sure there's a whole lot more to the real-life story, but the authors had neither the background nor the ability to reduce this story down to the size of a picture book. My Rainbow was taken out from the English curriculum of Montgomery County schools in January 2024, which tells me that even a school district that very much wanted to include LGBTQ+ books in school could see that this story is not just of low literary and artistic quality, but it has a muddled and possibly even harmful message. Pride Puppy was part of Montgomery County's preschool curriculum. It's an alphabet reader that shows a family attending a Pride event. Or it's supposed to be. A good alphabet reader helps little children learn the alphabet. The letters should be the center of attention, and the book should make use of alliteration and rhyme to help children begin not just learning letters, but start building phonics skills. Pride Puppy is so packed with imagery that the alphabet is completely upstaged. Structurally, this fails to be a book that would help children develop language skills, So on that point alone, it shouldn't be on the English curriculum for very young children. This book presents a colorful, sanitized version of what happens at Pride events. The drag queens in the book could easily be mistaken for just being women in Barbie-style get-ups, and there are a lot of kids in each image. But a lot of people think that Pride isn't for kids. Pride started as something that's explicitly about adult relationships. That's reflected in what people wear, or what they don't wear, as well as the happy but uninhibited behavior. There are parents who take their kids to Pride, but there are a lot who don't. Pride Puppy is not a great choice for a mandatory part of school curriculum because it gives the false impression that Pride events are G-rated and child-friendly. A lot of the references in this book are way over the heads of 4-year-olds. Like, it mentions Marsha P. Johnson, and a little kid will naturally ask,
Who's that?
and then story time will abruptly shift to the gritty streets of 1960s New York, where a violent riot broke out at a mafia-owned gay bar because the community got fed up by the constant hassling they were getting from the cops. Yeah, that's a story for 4-year-olds.
Nope.
The pictures are packed with banners with political slogans and flags for various identity groups that can't be comprehended by a 4-year-old. They haven't been alive long enough to have the background knowledge to understand what they're seeing. Does anybody really think that limited classroom time needs to be spent teaching 4-year-olds about all the different pride flags? At that age, they have more pressing concerns like remembering to go potty so they don't wet their pants. This isn't a book for little children. This is a book for LGBTQ+ adults who want little children to view them positively. And there's nothing wrong with wanting a kind and tolerant society, but it is wrong to approach teaching by making it all about you instead of the kids. If you can't empathize with parents who don't want their preschoolers reading a book that encourages them to find the leather and find the drag queen, I don't know what to tell you. So that's 2/3 of the books involved in Mahmoud versus Taylor that really just don't belong in the English curriculum, to the point that Montgomery County voluntarily backtracked on 2 of them. I've been pretty hard on these books, but only because they were taught in the wrong way, in the wrong class, to the wrong age group. I actually think these titles could be an interesting part of a high school social studies curriculum. These books are relevant to current events, constitutional law, and educational policy, all things that older kids should be learning about. Older students can also apply critical thinking to these texts, evaluating the strengths or weaknesses in their arguments. The case of Mahmoud versus Taylor would be helpful in lessons about how the Supreme Court functions. Most Supreme Court cases require a lot of background knowledge to understand, or they get into really complicated legal issues. But Mahmoud versus Taylor involves things familiar to high schoolers, making it easier to write an essay, have a classroom discussion, or participate in a formal debate about a question of constitutional law. If these books had been presented to older kids and their messages weren't presented as mandatory, I doubt very many parents would have had a problem with them. Happily, that means I can now move on to a much less stressful part of this book report. Out of the 3 remaining books, I'll say 2 could possibly be used in English class and 1 definitely qualifies. These books also show a huge jump in artistic and literary quality. They're a lot smarter in the way they communicate their message. None of these books tell children what to think or what to do. None of them get in between parents and their ability to transmit their values to their children. None of them try to redefine words or encourage kids to engage in specific social or political activism. They have characters with personalities who take part in plots that make sense and will encourage classroom discussion. These are books that even very conservative parents might not object to, depending on how they're taught. Love, Violet is pretty inoffensive if you just take it at face value. In fact, its biggest problem is that the story is a little bland. Violet is a girl who looks maybe 8 years old. She thinks her classmate Mira is awesome and daydreams about having fun adventures with her. But she wonders if Mira feels the same way. Valentine's Day is coming up, so Violet makes an extra special Valentine. An important bit of cultural context is that in America, kids give their friends Valentines at school, and it's just an act of friendship. It's normal to make a special one for a close friend. Outside the US, this book would instantly be more controversial because Valentine's Day is just for grown-up romance. Violet's Valentine gets damaged, but Mira's delighted with it all the same, and the 2 skip off to have fun, hand in hand. The illustrations make lovely use of color, do a lot of visual storytelling, and the compositions are nicely balanced. The art in Love, Violet is much better than the story, which is so thin that I don't think this book has a lot to offer to the English curriculum. The only discussion question I could come up with was, have you ever worried that someone you liked wouldn't like you back? To which everyone would go, yeah. Love, Violet is harmless if you read it for what it is. The only possible clues in the text that this is an LGBTQ+ book is that violet is a color that represents lesbians, and the girl has that haircut where one side is shorter than the other.
Well, if it works.
Parents objected to this book because of how it was taught. Love, Violet was commissioned and written by people who made it clear that this was an LGBTQ+ story, and the Montgomery County curriculum had teachers spell this out to the fourth graders who read it. I object to this in principle because teachers ruin a book by telling children what meaning a text must have. Also, if this book is meant to further LGBTQ+ acceptance, it was unwise to tell children who are nowhere near puberty that they can have romantic relationships. That's a pretty effective way to draw a crowd of angry and suspicious parents. This should be just another nice, forgettable picture book, but Love, Violet ended up being controversial because of the way it was taught, not what's in it. I think this book could be read in English class if you don't dump a bunch of adult opinion onto it, but I think it would be better to pick something with a more interesting plot. Prince and Knight is another nicely illustrated story. It's about a charming prince who is handsome and sincere. The king and queen know that one day he'll inherit the throne, and they want to find him a bride. They present him with a suitable array of conventionally attractive women with a variety of skin tones. Because at least the king and queen aren't racist, even if they've made the mistake of assuming that their son is straight. The prince meets a knight, and they fight a dragon, fall in love, and get married. The story doesn't make it clear if the prince knew all along that he was gay, or if he just didn't realize it until he met his true love. Everyone celebrates the wedding, and they live happily ever after. Prince and Knight is nice, but kind of shallow. The characters have no names, and the action isn't that exciting, which is a shame because I expect better from a story with a dragon in it. There's nothing to analyze because it has one straight, or not so straight, meaning. This book was on the curriculum for 8-year-olds. Ideally, something you read in English class should offer something for kids to interpret or relate to. Prince and Knight offers gay representation in a way that doesn't tell anyone else what to do or what ideas they should have, but not much else. This is a book about adults, not children. 8-year-olds won't relate to the prince's romantic dilemma because they're too young for dating and marriage. Right? It struck me as a book kids won't really engage with, but it has some nice illustrations, and a creative teacher could probably come up with some kind of lesson plan that justified it for use in English class. Some parents might object to the book because it portrays a gay couple, but there really isn't anything here that infringes on anyone else's lifestyle. And even the most religiously devout person should be able to respect the prince's integrity for not marrying some poor girl that he would never truly love. This brings me to the one story that I think has great illustrations, an engaging, relatable story, and is about a child that other children can relate to. This is not a book written by grown-ups who want to talk about themselves. This is a book written for children to help them with healthy personal development. Uncle Bobby's Wedding has charming, energetic illustrations and excellent integration of the text and pictures. Chloe is a little girl who does fun, appropriate, kid-centered activities with her Uncle Bobby. Then at a family barbecue, Uncle Bobby announces that he and his boyfriend Jamie are engaged. Everyone is excited, but Chloe worries that this means Uncle Bobby won't have time for her anymore. In the end, Jamie joins Bobby in making special time for Chloe. They have wholesome, child-centered fun. Chloe realizes that she isn't losing her Uncle Bobby, she has gained an Uncle Jamie. They have a great time at the wedding. This book isn't about gay marriage. It's about a little girl who's worried about what will happen when a new person joins the family, and the plot is similar to ones about the birth of a new baby being born. The uncle just happens to be gay in the story, but it would work exactly the same if he was straight. This is how you do representation while centering the personal and intellectual needs of children. It's also how you do representation without telling children what to think, which will annoy parents. This is far more effective than the approach of all those preachy books that I tore apart a few minutes ago. The characters in this story are well developed, and Chloe's emotional progress will give children something to talk about. Every kid has experienced adding and losing members from the family, as well as all the big emotions that go with that. Structurally, Uncle Bobby's Wedding easily meets the standard for use in the English curriculum. The only thing that some parents objected to was the depiction of a gay couple. All the adults in Uncle Bobby's wedding behave appropriately toward Chloe, having conversations with her and doing activities that center her needs and level of development. This book doesn't tell readers what values they should have or give them instructions about how to behave in public. It's just a story about a little girl and her growing family. It's really gone out of its way to show a model couple who are just nice people doing exactly the same things that straight people do. When Mahmoud versus Taylor was heard by the Supreme Court, Justice Samuel Alito examined the normalization of same-sex couples in Uncle Bobby's wedding. He asked why the Montgomery County parents feel that merely exposing their children to this story undermines their constitutionally protected beliefs about traditional marriage. Is this the case? I have no idea. That's what the Supreme Court is for. This concludes my most stressful book report ever. So in conclusion, Your Honors, I would like to testify that it was really useful to read these books. When hundreds of parents exercised their opt-out rights against this curriculum, and then hundreds of parents showed up to complain at school board meetings when those opt-out rights were taken away, maybe Montgomery County should have at least considered the possibility that their curriculum was flawed.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Montgomery County couldn't convince these parents that the LGBTQ+ curriculum was any good, so they just decided to force compliance. That backfired so hard that this fight went all the way to the Supreme Court.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
I think anyone who wants to bring LGBTQ+ curriculum into schools should only choose the highest quality books, design a curriculum that centers the educational and personal needs of children, place the books in the right category, and avoid using the school's authority to force children to adopt certain opinions.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
I think perhaps the school board liked the messages in these books so much that they failed to notice that these books make poor ambassadors for their cause. Uncle Bobby's Wedding is the only book on this list that's child-centered, age-appropriate, complex enough for children to discuss and analyze, and has high literary and artistic quality. The rest are really more about telling kids what to think than telling them a story. The activists and activist organizations that published some of these books forgot that preaching at people is rarely the best way to persuade them. Some of the other authors made the common mistake of thinking that anybody can write a great children's book, even if they have no background in writing for kids. The Supreme Court will rule on the Montgomery County parents' request to opt out of Montgomery County's LGBTQ+ curriculum in the coming weeks or months, and I'll give you a little update then. But in the meantime, maybe I'll do something less stressful, like juggling flaming chainsaws on a fraying tightrope strung over a boiling lake of acid with hungry, angry sharks in it.